I bought an old BMW at an auction for $50. But the next day while cleaning I accidentally found I bought an old BMW at an auction for $50. That was it. $50. I wasn't looking for anything special that Saturday morning. I wasn't trying to get rich, find a hidden treasure, or uncover some kind of mystery. I just wanted a cheap car. But the next morning, while cleaning it in my garage, I accidentally found something hidden beneath the driver's seat. At first, I thought it was an old piece of cardboard. Then I saw the envelope. And when I opened it, I found photographs, a key, and a handwritten note with 6 words that made my stomach drop. If you found this, don't trust anyone. My name is Daniel Carter, and before that weekend, I had never believed that a $50 car could completely change someone's life. I was 41 years old, divorced, working as a maintenance supervisor for a small apartment complex outside Phoenix, Arizona. My life wasn't terrible. It just wasn't particularly exciting. I lived alone in a small rented house. My daughter, Sophie, was 14 and stayed with me every other weekend. Most of my money went toward rent, child support, groceries, and fixing things that broke at the worst possible time. My own car had finally died 3 weeks earlier. The transmission was finished. The mechanic gave me a repair estimate that was more than the car was worth. So when my coworker Mike told me about a county auction where abandoned and seized vehicles were being sold, I decided to go. Don't expect much, Mike told me. I only need something that runs. He laughed. At an auction. That's exactly what everyone says. He was right. Most of the cars were wrecked. Some had missing parts. Others looked like they had been sitting in the desert for years. Then I saw the BMW. It was an older silver 5 Series. Probably 15 or 20 years old. The paint was faded. The driver's door had a long scratch down the side. One headlight was cracked. The tires were almost completely bald. But underneath all that, I could see something. The car had been expensive once. Very expensive. The interior was surprisingly clean. The leather seats weren't torn. The dashboard wasn't cracked. And when the auction employee turned the key, the engine actually started. It sounded rough, but it started. I checked the listing. 2004 BMW 530i. No known mechanical information. Sold as is. Starting bid $50. I raised my hand. Nobody else did. The auctioneer looked around. $50. Any 60. Nothing. Sold. Just like that, I owned a BMW for $50. I drove it home slowly because I didn't trust the brakes, the tires, or pretty much anything else about it. But it made it. That evening, I parked it in my driveway. I stood there looking at it for several minutes. It was ridiculous. A BMW for $50. Even if I had to put $1,000 into repairs, I figured I could still come out ahead. I had no idea that the car wasn't really abandoned. It had been waiting, and someone had desperately wanted it found. The next morning, I decided to clean it. That part seems almost funny to me now, because if I hadn't decided to clean the car that morning, I might never have found anything. I started with the trunk. There was nothing unusual. An old tire jack, a pair of work gloves, some empty plastic bottles, a faded owner's manual. Then I cleaned the back seats. Still nothing. Finally, I moved to the driver's side. I pulled out the floor mat, vacuumed the carpet, wiped the dashboard. Then I noticed something strange. The driver's seat didn't slide forward as far as it should. I pulled the lever underneath it. Nothing. I tried again. Still nothing. So I leaned down and looked underneath. That's when I saw a small black object wedged against the metal frame. I reached for it. It was a key. Not a normal car key. A small old-fashioned metal key. There was a tiny piece of tape wrapped around it. Written on the tape were 3 numbers. 417. I stared at it. I had no idea what it opened. I put it on the workbench. Then I went back to cleaning. About 10 minutes later, I noticed something else. The carpet underneath the driver's seat looked slightly raised. I pressed it. It felt hard. Not like metal. Something underneath the carpet. I grabbed a screwdriver and carefully lifted the edge. There was a small rectangular panel. It wasn't part of the original BMW design. Someone had installed it. My heart started beating faster. I removed the screws. Underneath was a shallow compartment. And inside that compartment was a brown envelope. It was old. Very old. The edges were worn. There was no name on it, no address. Just one sentence written across the front. For whoever finds this car. I sat down on the garage floor. For some reason, I didn't open it immediately. I just stared at it. There are moments in life when your instincts tell you that something is wrong. That was one of them. But curiosity won. I opened the envelope. Inside were 7 photographs. The first showed the BMW, not the BMW as I had bought it, the BMW when it was almost new. The second photograph showed a man standing beside it. He looked to be in his late 30s. Dark hair, thin face, wearing a mechanic's uniform. On the back of the photograph was a date, October 14, 2007. The third photograph showed the same man standing outside a house. The fourth showed a woman. The fifth showed a young boy. And the sixth showed something that made me stop breathing for a moment. A warehouse. A large industrial warehouse. And parked outside it were 3 black SUVs, all with their license plates covered. I turned the photograph over. There was writing on the back. They moved everything here. I felt a chill run through me. Then I found the 7th photograph. It showed a bank deposit box. The number on the front was 417. I looked at the little key sitting on my workbench. 417. The key belonged to the box. I knew it. I just didn't know where the box was. Then I found the note. It was folded into 4 pieces. I opened it carefully. The handwriting was messy. Almost desperate. It said, "My name is Michael Turner. If you're reading this, I am probably dead or they finally found me." I hid the key because I couldn't trust the police, my lawyer, or my own family. I read that sentence twice. Then I continued. The BMW is the only thing they didn't take because they believed it was worthless. I looked toward the driveway. Suddenly, the $50 price didn't seem funny anymore. The note continued. If you bought this car legally, then the contents of box 4017 belong to you. But before you open it, understand one thing. There was a blank space. Then, the people who are looking for what is inside will not care that you're innocent. I stopped reading. My first thought was simple. Put everything back. Forget it. Sell the car, walk away. But then I saw the last line. If you have found this, please find my daughter. Her name was Emily. She was 19 years old. And according to the note, she had no idea what had happened to her father. I spent the next hour searching for Michael Turner. There were dozens of people with that name. Most were useless. But eventually, I found an old newspaper article from 2009. A mechanic named Michael Turner had disappeared. The article said he had worked at a repair shop in Mesa. He had apparently vanished after telling a friend that he was in serious trouble. The police had investigated. No body was ever found. No arrest was made. The case went cold. I stared at the screen. Then I looked back at the photographs. This wasn't a random story. This was real, and somehow, I had just bought the one thing Michael Turner had left behind. His car. I called Mike. I didn't tell him everything. I just asked if he knew anything about the auction vehicle's previous owner. He said he would look into it. 2 hours later, he called me back. "Dan," he said, "you need to hear this." The BMW hadn't actually been abandoned. It had been seized years earlier as part of an investigation. But no criminal charges had ever been filed against the owner. The county had eventually obtained the vehicle through a complicated property process. Mike paused. What? The previous registered owner wasn't Michael Turner. I frowned. Then who was it? His brother. I felt my stomach tighten. The brother's name was Richard Turner, and according to public records, Richard had died 6 years earlier. But his daughter was still alive, Emily. Michael's daughter, the same girl mentioned in the note. I spent the next 2 days trying to find her. Eventually, I found her. She lived in Flagstaff. She was 26 now. She worked as a receptionist at a dental office. I stared at her photograph online for several minutes. There was something about her face. The same eyes as the woman in the old photograph. Michael's daughter. I called the number listed for her workplace. "Hello, is this Emily Turner?" "Yes, my name is Daniel Carter. I bought a BMW at an auction." Silence. Then she said something I will never forget. "Where did you get that car?" Her voice had changed. It was no longer casual. It was frightened. "I bought it at a county auction." Another silence. Then she whispered, "Please don't tell anyone you have it." Emily agreed to meet me the next day. We met at a coffee shop halfway between our towns. She arrived 20 minutes early. She kept checking the window. When she sat down, she didn't even order coffee. "Where is it?" she asked. "The BMW." She nodded. "I have it at home." She stared at me. "My father disappeared in that car." I didn't say anything. She continued. "He was investigating something. I was young. My mother wouldn't tell me much. Everyone said he had run away." "Do you believe that?" "No." She looked down at the table. "Because 3 months before he disappeared, he gave me a birthday present." "What was it?" "A toy car." I almost laughed, but she didn't. She reached into her purse and pulled out an old photograph. It showed a little girl holding a miniature silver BMW. "He told me, someday you'll understand why this car matters." I showed her the photographs. Her face went pale. She touched the picture of her father. "I've never seen this." I gave her the note. She read it. Then she started crying. Not loudly, just silent tears. When she finished, She wiped her face and looked at me. Did you find the key? I nodded. Box 417. She looked terrified. I know where that is. Emily explained that her father had once rented a small safe deposit box at a bank in Phoenix. But she didn't know the number. Until I showed her the key. She immediately recognized the bank logo engraved into the metal. The next morning, we went there together. I expected security questions, identity checks, paperwork. I did not expect the manager to recognize the key. He looked at it for several seconds. Then he looked at me. Where did you get this? I said nothing. Emily stepped forward. It belonged to my father. The manager's expression changed. He disappeared into the back office. 5 minutes later, he returned with a file. This box hasn't been accessed in 17 years. He looked at Emily. Your father paid the rental fees in advance. For how long? 20 years. Emily looked at me. Neither of us spoke. The manager led us downstairs. The box was small. Metal, number 417. I inserted the key. It turned. Inside was a black metal case. There was also a second envelope. And a USB drive. Emily reached toward the case. I stopped her. Maybe we should do this somewhere safe. She nodded. We took everything to my house. I locked the doors, closed the curtains, and opened the case. Inside was a stack of documents, bank statements, property records, photographs, names, dates, and one handwritten ledger. I began reading. At first, I didn't understand what I was looking at. Then I saw the amounts, millions of dollars, companies, shell corporations, property purchases, fake invoices, payments. Michael Turner hadn't been investigating one criminal. He had been investigating an entire network. And the warehouse in the photograph was one of their locations. Then Emily found something. She froze. What? She pointed at a name. Richard Turner, her uncle. The same man who had officially been listed as the previous owner of the BMW. I looked at her. Your uncle was involved. She shook her head. No. Then why is his name here? Emily kept reading. Then she found another document. A life insurance policy. Her uncle had taken one out on Michael, 6 months before Michael disappeared. The beneficiary was Richard. Neither of us spoke for several seconds. Then my phone rang. Unknown number. I answered. Hello. Nobody spoke. Then a man's voice said, You should put the documents back where you found them. My blood went cold. Who is this? You don't understand what you've bought. The call ended. Emily stared at me. Did they know? I think so. How? I looked toward the window. I suddenly remembered something. The BMW had been parked outside my house for 3 days. Anyone could have watched it. Anyone could have followed me. And if someone knew what was inside, they knew about box 417 too. That night I didn't sleep. At 20:13 in the morning I heard a sound outside. A car door. I got up, looked through the blinds. A black SUV was parked across the street. No headlights. Engine running. I called the police. By the time they arrived, the SUV was gone. The officer took my statement. He told me to keep the doors locked. But before leaving, he asked me a strange question. Did you recently buy a vehicle at an auction? I stared at him. Yes. He wrote something down. Which vehicle? The BMW. He looked up. Then he said, You're not the first person who's asked about that car. I felt my stomach drop. Who else? He hesitated. 3 days ago, a man came into the station asking about the same vehicle. Did he give you his name? No. What did he look like? The officer described him. Middle-aged, dark hair, gray jacket. I knew that face. It was in one of the photographs. The man standing beside Michael, the mechanic. But that wasn't possible. The photograph was 19 years old. The man should have been almost 60. The officer left. I went back inside. Emily was still awake. I showed her the photograph. She stared at it, then whispered, That's not Michael's coworker. Who is he? She swallowed. That's my Uncle Richard. The next morning, everything changed. Richard Turner had supposedly died 6 years earlier. But the man in the photograph was still alive. And apparently, someone had been asking about the BMW. We needed answers. Emily contacted a private investigator who had worked on her father's disappearance years ago. His name was Frank Dawson. He agreed to meet us. When he saw the photographs, he didn't look surprised. He looked tired. I always knew Richard was alive. Emily stared at him. Then why didn't you tell me? Because I didn't have proof. He opened an old folder. Inside were surveillance photographs, bank records, vehicle registrations, and photographs of Richard taken over several years. He had been living under different names. Your father discovered something, Frank said. Something big. What? Money laundering through construction companies. Frank explained that Michael had worked as a mechanic, but several of his wealthy customers had connections to local development firms. He began noticing unusual patterns. Deliveries. Fake repair invoices. He started documenting everything. Then he disappeared. But why the BMW? I asked. Frank looked at me. Because Michael didn't trust digital storage. He pointed toward the USB drive. He used that car as a dead drop. I felt a chill. Then why didn't anyone find it? Because Richard thought the car had been destroyed. That explained everything. The county auction had accidentally returned the evidence to the world, and I had bought it for $50. Frank helped us decrypt the USB drive. There were hundreds of files. The most important was a video. Michael appeared on screen. He looked exhausted. He was sitting inside the BMW. The same BMW now sitting in my driveway. He looked directly into the camera. If Emily ever sees this, he said, I need you to know that I didn't leave because I wanted to. Emily covered her mouth. Michael continued. Your uncle knows what I found. He paused. His eyes filled with tears. That was my mistake. Then he gave the names of several people involved. Politicians, business owners, developers, accountants, and one police officer. The same police department that had investigated his disappearance. At the end of the video, Michael said, If I'm gone, don't go looking for revenge. He looked down. Just make sure the truth survives. The screen went black. Emily was crying. I was too. But then another file opened automatically. It was a photograph. A recent photograph. Taken only 3 weeks earlier. It showed Richard Turner, alive, standing outside a storage facility. And beside him was the black SUV that had been parked outside my house. We went to the police. But this time, we didn't go to the local station. Frank contacted a federal investigator he trusted. We handed over everything. The documents, the photographs, the USB drive, the recordings, the bank records. Everything. Within 2 weeks, investigators confirmed that several companies mentioned in Michael's files were still operating, and one of them owned the warehouse from the old photograph. A surveillance operation began. I stayed out of it, mostly. But then one evening, I received a message. No phone number, just 4 words, you have his car. I showed Frank. He immediately told me not to respond. I didn't. 20 minutes later, another message arrived. Bring it to the warehouse. I knew then that they were watching me. But what they didn't know was that investigators were watching them too. The BMW became evidence. The warehouse became evidence. And Richard finally made a mistake. He showed up. Investigators arrested him before he could leave. The man everyone thought had been dead for 6 years was alive. And he had been living under a false identity. He eventually confessed. Not to everything. But enough. Michael had discovered the operation. Richard had tried to convince him to stay quiet. When Michael refused, Richard helped arrange his disappearance. Michael was held for several days. He was eventually killed. His body had been hidden in an abandoned property outside the state. For 18 years, Emily had believed her father had abandoned her. He hadn't. He had been trying to protect her. Months later, the case went to court. The investigation uncovered more than anyone expected. Millions of dollars had been moved through shell companies. Several people were arrested. Some cooperated. Others fought the charges. Richard received a lengthy prison sentence. The officer who had helped cover up the original investigation was also prosecuted. But none of that brought Michael back. And that was the hardest part. One afternoon, Emily and I went to the cemetery where Michael had finally been buried. She placed the old photograph of the BMW beside his grave. I used to hate him, she said. I didn't know what to say. I thought he left me. She wiped her eyes. All those years. Then she smiled through the tears. He never left. I stood beside her. No, she looked at me. He just couldn't come home. As for me, I still had the BMW. The court eventually confirmed that I had purchased it legally. The car itself wasn't worth much. But I couldn't sell it. Not after everything. I had the scratches repaired, the engine rebuilt, the interior cleaned. It looked almost new. I gave Emily the keys. She stared at me. Why not? It's yours. No, I said. It was your father's. She started crying. She hugged me. And for the first time, I understood that the $50 auction purchase had never really been about a car. It had been about a message that had waited nearly 20 years for someone to hear it. Michael had hidden the truth inside a worthless-looking BMW because he believed someone would eventually find it. He was right. He just had no idea that the person would be me. A divorced maintenance worker who needed a cheap car. A man who thought $50 was all he was risking. Sometimes I think about that morning, the old BMW sitting in my driveway. The dirt underneath the driver's seat. The envelope. The key marked 417. And those 6 words. If you found this, don't trust anyone. I still have the original note. I keep it in a locked drawer. Not because I'm afraid anymore, but because I never want to forget what it taught me. We often think important discoveries happen to important people. investigators, lawyers, detectives, journalists, people with money and resources. But sometimes the person who finds the truth is simply the person who happens to look under the right seat. I bought a BMW for $50. I thought I had found a bargain. Instead, I found a man's final attempt to tell his daughter that he loved her. And in the end, that was worth far more than any amount of money. So let me ask you something. If you had been in my position, what would you have done? Would you have opened the envelope? Would you have taken the key to box 417? Or would you have sold the BMW and walked away? Tell me in the comments. And if this story kept you listening until the very end, please like the video and subscribe to the channel. It really helps us continue bringing you stories like this. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you in the next story.